Good evening. Please welcome to the Pinole Planning Commission meeting on April 27th, 2026 at 7 p.m. This meeting is currently being held at the City Council Chambers at 2131 Pear Street in Pinole. To submit a public comment on this meeting in person, please fill out a yellow public comment card and submit it to city staff. If you may also comment on this meeting via Zoom, and you can use a desktop computer, phone device, or mobile device, and use the Zoom application. This meeting is also being webcast on the webinar ID 865-0537-5301. The public may also join via phone at 669-900-6833 or by dialing 253-215-8782 or by dialing 346-248-7799. Speakers will be asked to provide their name and city of residence, although providing this is not required for participation. Each speaker will be afforded up to 5 minutes to speak. Speakers will be muted until their opportunity to provide comment. When the chair opens the comment period for the item that you would like to speak upon, please use the raise hands feature or press star 9 if connected via telephone, which will alert staff that you have a comment to provide, and then please press star 6 to unmute. If you'd like to comment with your video enabled, please let the city staff know that you'd like to have the camera turned on once you speak. The public can also submit comments in person by sending these public comments to the planning staff before the meeting via email at dhannum@pinole.gov. Please include your full name, city of residence, and the item that you are commenting on. There are other ways to watch this meeting. Currently, temporarily for tonight only, this meeting is being broadcast on channel 28 and additionally channel 1070 and 1071 via Comcast. This meeting is also streamed on the city's website as normal. A new channel for Pinole TV is currently in the works and will be updated as soon as possible. If none of these options are available to you, if you need any assistance with the public comment, please contact the planning manager, David Hannum, at 510-724-8912 or dhannum@pinole.gov. In compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, if you need special assistance to participate in a city meeting or if you need a copy of the agenda or the agenda packet in appropriate alternative format, please contact the city clerk's office at 510-724-8928. Notification of at least 48 hours in advance prior to the meeting when services are needed will assist city staff in ensuring that reasonable arrangements can be made to provide accessibility to the meeting or service. Please note that all staff reports are available for inspection at the city's website or may also contact the city clerk via email at hbell@pinole.gov. Citizen participation. Persons wish to speak on an item listed on the agenda may do so when the chair asks for comments in favor or in opposition to the item under consideration. After all those persons wishing to speak have done so, the hearing will be closed and the matter will be discussed amongst the commission prior to rendering a decision. Any person may appeal the action of the planning commission or of the planning manager by filing an appeal with the city clerk in writing within 10 days of such action. Following a public hearing, the city council may act to confirm, modify, or reverse the action of the planning commission, and the planning commission may act to confirm, modify, or reverse the action of the planning manager. Cost to appeal a decision is $500 and a minimum $2,500 deposit fee. Please note, if you challenge a decision of the commission regarding a project in court, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at the public hearing or in writing delivered to the city of Pinole at or prior to the public hearing. The Ralph M. Brown Act, Government Code 54950. In enacting this chapter, the legislature finds and declares that the public commissions, boards, and councils and other public agencies in the state exist to aid the conduct of the people's business. It is the intent of the law and that their actions be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted openly. The people of the state do not yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people in delegating authority do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so they may retain control over the instruments they have created. And with that, this meeting will be called to order at 7:07 p.m. All those willing and able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now for our land acknowledgement. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Ohlone people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to our Ohlone elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Ohlone land, the land that Pinole sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Ohlone community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. And with that, Planning Manager Hannum, could we please have a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Uch.
Here.
Commissioner Huey.
Present.
Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
Present.
Commissioner Martinez. He is absent. Commissioner Bender.
Present.
Vice Chair Minez.
Present, noting for the record typical ex parte communications to my email list about the topics on this meeting's agenda and other events occurring this week.
And Chair Sandoval.
Present.
Let the record show that Commissioner Martinez did let us know that he would be absent from tonight's meeting, and we have a quorum so we can take action on any item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hannum. Our next item is citizens to be heard. The public may address the Planning Commission on items that are within its jurisdiction and not otherwise listed on the agenda. Planning Commissioners may discuss the matter brought to their attention, but by state law, the Ralph M. Brown Act action must be deferred to a future meeting. Time allowed is 5 minutes each. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
Yes, we do have one caller online. Caller with a phone number ending in 5748. So when you are ready, please press *6 to unmute.
And as a reminder, the time allowed is 5 minutes.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, my name is Anthony Wellspring, senior citizen, longtime resident of Pinole, over 50 years. I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but on behalf of myself and other senior members and not so senior members of Pinole, we'd like to voice our concerns with some different infrastructure issues. And I know too bad Mr. Martinez wasn't there because he backed us on a few of them, I believe about a month ago, when he said, it sounds like the city of Pinole, be it the mayor and or councilmen, quote, the three musketeers, or our rogue city council hasn't got the word from the public yet. And we've done everything we could by filing these things online, claims with Caltrans, claims with Public Works, etc. And the new city manager hasn't done much either to rectify some of these problems, as small or big as they may sound. It's not a good look for our city. You know, it makes us look like we're dummies out there. If not, we live in a third-rate city, and the public doesn't deserve that with the taxes we pay and the increased taxes they want on the November ballot. Again, not to mention the county has raised the taxes on us. But case in point, the bridge, both the bridges at the Pinole Senior Center are in disrepair. Primarily, immediate disrepair would be the two major plank boards on the bridge. They went out a few weeks ago, and Public Works, under the direction of Mr. Joe Bingham, I guess he let them buy one board to replace one board, and it was like two boards next to it. Nobody said anything about replacing or wanting to do that, but it's the same issue with like the potholes. They'll go out and fix one or two potholes, and they got 3 or 4 sitting right next to it on either side of the pothole. But, you know, they don't come back to finish the job because that they started. And now there's a big hole in that bridge that's the size of, I would say, as the size and length of somebody's forearm there on the Planning Commission, if not they're basically their whole arm. And there's no cones there. They didn't close down the bridge, and little kids were stumbling over there with their tricycles and people, and that's been going on for a few weeks now. And the same thing that at the dog park bridge by the Pinole Creek there. and the potholes are rampant all over our city, and so are the drains that are clogged. And they can blame it on Caltrans in one respect, but you know, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, so to speak, and somebody's got to pick up the phone and write Caltrans or file a claim other than the general public to twist Caltrans' arm, because they're doing the work for Orinda, Lafayette, San Ramon, Walnut Creek, etc. in those people's front or backyards, but they're treating us like chopped liver out here in Pinole. So it's time for people to, you know, put the pedal to the metal on not so much the staff, but the city and city council that pretty much runs the staff. And David Henham can attest to that, not our interim city manager. Another point to reflect on with regard to poor governance and in our city without checks and balances and people to be held accountable for the jobs they do good and not so good is what continues with that bridge, that failure of the bridge out there just past Station 74 on Pinole Valley Road. We know that bridge is in disrepair, but I haven't heard boo about somebody trying to parlay some general funds or grant money, or even go out and change the battery on the horses out there on the bridge right next to the fire station. You think one of the fire station people could do that? So much so the person's house across the street got hit the other night by somebody speeding around that curb, and it took out half of their fencing on their front yard directly across that bridge hairpin turn over there on Pinole Valley Road. So we need to
Please
step
wrap
up
your
to
comment.
that and
Your time is
enforce
up.
codes too, like the codes at Dave's Chicken. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other citizens to be heard?
There are no other comments at this time.
Okay, sounds good. And thank you for your comment. And I would probably suggest that the best course of action would be to working with the city's public works for following up on some of these infrastructure needs. If you have an issue with Caltrans, feel free to report it. And if you haven't heard back from Caltrans, please feel free to contact your state representatives. They can follow up with Caltrans on that as well. Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
Yes, I think Mr. Hanna might want to reply to the comment made more directly towards him about, you know, who is actually in charge of him, because I'm pretty sure it's actually, you know, not the council who's directly in charge of staff here.
No, it's the city manager's in charge of staff, so, yeah.
Thank you. And do we have any other citizens to be heard?
No other comments at this time.
All right, and now we will move on to our meeting minutes and the meeting minutes for the April 13th, 2026 meeting. Does anyone on the commission have any questions, comments, or corrections for the minutes? I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for April 13th, 2026.
A second.
Thank you. We have a second and a motion and a second. Planning Manager Hannon, could we please have a roll call?
Commissioner Huey,
Yes.
Commissioner Utsch,
Yes.
Commissioner Lamb-Julian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bender,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menez,
Yes.
Chair Sandoval.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Thank you, and that will take us to our next item, item G, public hearings, which we have none this evening. That moves us to item H, old business, information on police department crime reporting data.
Mr. Chair, if I could, what I'd like to do tonight, before we hear this item, is I'd like to switch the two items and hear the housing item first. We have a consultant and we have our housing fellow here tonight, and I'd like to get them in and out a little bit earlier. And so if we could have a motion and second to change the items and hear the new business first, and then go to the old business.
Sounds good. I agree. And I'd like to make a motion to take item I first, new business housing successor fund policy guide.
A second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Plan Manager Henham, could we please have the roll call?
Commissioner Utsch,
Yes.
Commissioner Huey,
Yes.
Commissioner Lamb-Julian,
Yes.
Commissioner Bender,
Yes.
Vice Chair Menez,
Yes.
Chair Sandoval.
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
All right, so that will mean we will take our item I first, housing successor fund policy guide. Do we have a presentation on this item?
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Jared Murdy. I've met some of you at some council meetings, and this is ASIN and DA with NCLT. We are here tonight to discuss a preliminary draft, or more like kind of a conceptual level of the policy guidebook that we'll be working on for the city. So just to start with introductions, like I said, my name is Jared Murdy. I am the policy fellow here with the city of Pinole. This is through a program called the Partnership for the Bay's Future, which is just that. It's a partnership between multiple advocacy organizations and philanthropy entities with the express goal of creating more sustainable, affordable, and equitable housing here in the Bay Area. So I am a part of a fellowship program, which is a mid-career program that consists of site teams submitting joint applications to receive fellows and achieve specific policy goals. So so the city of Pinole submitted an application in conjunction with NCLT and the Richmond Community Foundation for the express policy goals of a rental registry, which we are launching next week, actually, a social impact bond program that will finance the acquisition and rehabilitation of blighted and abandoned homes here in Pinole, then sell them affordably to lower income first-time home buyers, and this policy guidebook, which is part of the housing element requirements for the city. But I'll hand it off to Asen to introduce himself and his organization.
Commissioners, thank you so much for having me. My name is Asen NDI. I'm the Executive Director of the Northern California Land Trust. We are the nation's oldest land trust west of the Mississippi. We were founded in 1973. We're based in Berkeley, California, but we have properties in 6 cities and 4 counties throughout the Bay Area, including one right here in Pinole.
And so, yeah, as I was saying, we are working on the policy guidebook, which is a part of the city's housing element. Why don't you take that away?
And I'll go ahead and just introduce kind of the work that we, particularly at NCLT, will be doing in conjunction with Jared and with the city of Pinole. So as I'm sure all of you know, California law requires all cities to plan for housing at all income levels. Pinole's housing element includes Program 7, which directs the city to create a policy for its affordable housing funds, particularly its successor, its housing redevelopment agency successor fund. So working with Jared, our goal is to develop a robust policy that is guided by the 3 Ps principle of preservation, production, and preservation. These principles are something that NCLT has been really a leader in the past few years, both on the production side and on the preservation side. And we're going to be hopefully working with community members to think of new potential ways to protect tenants here in the city. We're doing a survey of other cities to see kind of what kind of 3-piece policies they've passed, and we're also really trying to look at policies that are been successful at cities the scale of Pinole, particularly here in the East Bay.
So in addition to that, one of the first things we wanted to do was ensure that our efforts were informed by our community here. So last year in October, we launched a housing input survey, and it got 150 participants so far. We will also be doing some in-person events later next month, which Jason will discuss in a minute. But so far with those survey findings, and when we'll be coming back to you guys in June to get official endorsement on this work. But in that we will kind of go more into depth on the survey findings. But so far, there's strong support showing that folks feel the city needs more sustainable housing, affordable and home ownership, and senior housing. 58% agreed that housing affordability is a problem for residents. 32% felt that affordable housing was Pinole's most important housing need. Listing, or the way folks tiered things, they felt the role of the city was to make it easier to build, support rental assistance, support first-time homeowners, and offer financial assistance. Lastly, they felt residents that needed help were seniors, first-time homeowners, renters, families with children, and individuals experiencing homelessness. So this information already is starting to inform the policies and the programs that we're looking at and what we think will be viable for this community. Asen can discuss a little bit more about what we're doing for these events.
Yeah, so on May 7th and May 7th and May 13th, we're hoping to have public resident community engagement meetings. We're hoping to be able to get some feedback on some of the ideas that we want to present to the community, and then also hear ideas from the community of what could potentially go into this policy playbook. I worked on a process similar in the city of San Jose. Obviously, it's a larger city, but we found that hearing from residents and particularly going directly to them really does very quickly inform and change the policy process. And so we're really hoping to get some specific feedback about some of the policies I'll be talking about a little bit later.
And so that's kind of our plan. That's what we're working on over the next months. But as I was saying, we have started some of that work, and we can kind of discuss some of those. So as we go through this, the first one we're going to discuss is the in lieu fee. This is actually a part that was expressly mentioned in Program 7, so it is something that we do quite have to address. So in lieu fees, for those, which, I mean, this is a very knowledgeable group, but essentially the city has an inclusionary housing requirement. So all developments over 4 units, I believe, have to have 15% of the units set aside to be sold affordably. There are additional requirements that 40% of those affordable units are reserved for deeply affordable units. In lieu fees are essentially paid in lieu of developing that housing. So it's a fee set typically by unit or square footage that will be paid to the city for the purpose of funding affordable housing elsewhere. In 2025, the City of Pinole commissioned a report from RSG, our policy consultants, our housing policy consultants, and their analysis, which looked at pro formas and all the complicated building budgetary stuff that I'm sure people love to look at, found that a fee between $9 and $25 per square foot for home ownership style housing developments and $12 to $49 per square foot for rental housing developments would be the minimum and maximum feasible fees that the city could charge developers in order to ensure their projects still pencil or they meet their break-even point. Because the maximum feasible fee would not adequately cover the cost of developing a comparable number of affordable housing units, city staff is actually recommending to not move forward with the development of an in lieu fee. So far, our inclusionary policy has not hindered our development rates. We have things in the pipeline. There's a paragraph in the report kind of giving a very kind of high-level update to the city's RENA obligations, but city staff are pretty confident that we're on the right path for that. And so based on being on the right path, based on it not presenting significant issues with developers, and based on what's considered feasible, likely having a negative impact on affordability here in Pinole, we are recommending against moving forward with an in lieu fee. The next program that I can talk about is also kind of we've already started this because we have. So the CORE program, Coordinated Outreach, Referral and Engagement, is a program that is run by the county's Continuum of Care. Last year, the city of Pinole engaged them and joined a now Quad City contract to have a dedicated outreach team for individuals experiencing homelessness here in Pinole. So CORE works to engage and stabilize homeless individuals living outside through consistent outreach to facilitate and or deliver health and basic needs services and secure permanent housing. So they just, I believe last month, had a report back to City Council about the work that they're doing here. This is something that is being funded by the Housing Successor Fund. Around $500,000 annually is allowable, has an allowable use of homelessness engagement and prevention efforts. And so because this falls clearly within it, and we do have, folks saying that this is something that they feel the city should be doing, we were able to move forward with this application pretty quickly, and we'll continue to recommend the program. So we currently, essentially what the contract we have is it splits a dedicated outreach team between us and the cities of Hercules, El Cerrito, and San Pablo. So that in addition to the teams that service the entire county, we have a dedicated team for our region, which has allowed an increase in engagement and improved outcomes. And I will hand it off to Isin for some of our ones that we are working on proposing to the community.
Yeah, so what we really want to do is kind of present a menu of options that kind of go at those kind of three overarching goals of preservation, production, and protection. And so some of the programs that we've started looking at in other cities include a tenant retention program, and this would be high impact emergency rental assistance for folks who maybe have gotten behind on rent or had a temporary loss of income or emergency, and would be able to tap into a fund to be able to get back on track, and hopefully also be able to remain in their homes. This is a program that is very common. We're looking at El Cerrito's program. We're also looking at the City of Berkeley's program as well. Another program that we're looking at is down payment assistance. We currently have a contract with Alameda County, but we are looking to see if we can get a program with Contra Costa County to provide up to $200,000 in down payment assistance through the Cal Home program. This obviously, of course, would allow for folks to be able to access home ownership, which is something that we've heard from residents here in Pinole. Another option for affordability and home ownership are community land trusts. What community land trusts are essentially a organization that holds the land in trust and separates the ownership between the land and the improvement or the home. That allows for a more affordable entry point into home ownership. However, it also allows a way to maintain affordability through successive ownerships by limiting the amount of equity increase over years. And so it allows for not just one family to be able to access home ownership, but also the next family and the next family, and so on and so on. Now I'll pass it back to Jared.
If you want to talk about just cause eviction, then I'll just
Got it. Another option is looking at just cause and good cause policies. As I'm sure you know, there is already a statewide version through AB 1482 and AB 1483. However, there are some of the good cause reasons, both owner-led or tenant-led, that we may need to have a local ordinance for. And so we'd be exploring that with residents. And then lastly, one of the ways that we can make sure that residents are treated fairly in our legal system is to make sure that they have access to free or low cost counsel to allow them to be able to come to some hopefully fair resolutions when evictions do unfortunately happen.
And then the last one that are also looking at is rent stabilization. So a rent stabilization ordinance would implement limits on rent increases, allowing for gradual percentage-based increases. It would also aim to protect tenants from arbitrary evictions. So this is also something that the state has, but we would be looking into additional constraints to more support renters here in the city of Pinole. One of the reasons I kind of highlight this one conceptually is it highlights the importance of another program we're working on here, which is our rental inventory. Once we start bringing in data from that, both with this first year of having it, where we can have this kind of initial snapshot of the actual rental stock here in Pinole, we can then begin tracking trends over the years and see if there really is the need or desire for improved protections for residents in regards to rents. As of right now, we don't really have quantitative data that shows that the city needs protections or stabilization, but this will be a useful tool in that conversation as we move forward. So that is the materials that we are going to be engaging folks with over the next month, and plan to bring a fully put together policy guidebook to both this planning commission for an endorsement and also to city council for approval. Those should be happening in June, but we'd just like to open the table for your guys' input and feedback regarding these. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation and this important work. I think to start, we'll go with questions and feedback from the commission, and I'll start to my right with Commissioner Bender.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have a question about the rent stabilization. You mentioned that there are state thresholds or limits. Could you explain further what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. So back since 2019, AB 1482 passed. It created a annual state limit for rent increases. It's particularly effective at preventing rent gouging. So it creates a maximum limit of 10% per year for any property, any rental property in California. So it has, I think, been a really, really effective policy. The baseline number is 5% plus the annual CPI with a limit of 10%. So particularly when it was passed, the limits were on an annual basis 6, 7, at the most 8%. Unfortunately, as we've been experiencing some critically inflationary times, that limit has hit 10% multiple times.
Okay. And my second question, actually, on page 23, the very last sentence, which is based on this information, is unlikely that an in lieu fee will be necessary to fulfill the city's RENA obligations, but will limit the city's ability to develop affordable housing. Could you explain that very last portion of that sentence?
Yes. So because city staff have kind of looked at our RENA obligations and feel pretty confident that we will be able to meet the 500 units by, what year was that actually?
2031.
2031. We don't see it as something that is going to be explicitly necessary in reaching that goal. However, because if we were to impose even the maximum $49 per unit instead, that would mean that those inclusionary units wouldn't necessarily get developed. So if we do the math, the $49 per square foot just simply wouldn't cover the same amount of units. If we had, I think if we do the simplest math and we have a 100-unit property, each 1,000 units, they would be required to build 15 affordable units. However, if we were to go the fee way, to charge them a fee that would cover that, and we take, again, a simple number of saying it's around $1 million a door, that fee would have to be like $150 to actually cover the $150 per square foot to actually cover the cost of building those units. So if the city were to charge the $49, it wouldn't generate enough money to actually build those 15 units.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that explanation. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Bender. Commissioner Utch.
Hi, I have one question out of curiosity also on page 23 in reference to the in lieu fee. Why is it that it seems like the fees are higher per square foot for ownership style housing than for rental housing? I'm just curious, what's the exact reason for that, generally speaking?
Yeah, if you want to, I'd have a very
Yeah, so in lieu fees are basically based on something called nexus studies that look at what the impact of market rate housing and development has on housing need for low income people. And so the equation that is used to try to arrive at these numbers show that there's less of a nexus impact for ownership than there is for rental. You're welcome.
Yeah, I was gonna, did that kind of help? Essentially, I think because rental properties kind of have a longer term, like revenue generating process, then the amount of money that because a home ownership, it's a point in time, you sell the property once you're done developing it, whereas rental revenue has a kind of long-term gradual revenue creation. And so that's kind of the break point of why the fees end up being different, because of how the profit ends up being different in that way.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification, and that's all my questions for now.
Thank you, Commissioners. Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
So for the tenant retention program, I have a note here through the Housing Successor Fund, right, for residents that are in need of financial assistance. Clarification on if it was just, what am I trying to say? To where you're behind on your payments and it turns into a domestic violence situation. So wanting clarification, has your team reached out to maybe the Family Justice Center on how to partner up and being able to support that situation?
We have not, but that's a really, really great suggestion, and we'll be doing that immediately. Appreciate
Okay.
it.
Yeah. And then I would add that, so one of the programs that we're looking at is the county's Housing Security Fund, which my understanding is they do kind of have those partnerships and connect those resources. One of the benefits, if we were to model it or even partner with them on the program, is tapping that resource also through CORE, which is the program we were discussing as well. I know that they do have, in their list of impactful anecdotes, they do have multiple stories of using the security fund to help in domestic violence situations.
Okay. Also, if I could add the Safe Center, it hasn't officially opened doors yet, but that would be a one-stop shop for the immigrant community coming in, especially during these times. I also remember that just cause eviction did come before council, and it did not go through. So just help me understand how.
So there is the statewide version, which is included. Again, it does have those baseline protections. So on the owner side, it's owner move-in, demolition, sort of owner-driven reasons. and of course tenant-driven reasons, non-payment of rent, criminal activity, so on and so on. We're looking to see whether or not there are potential gaps in the state law and whether or not we could think about what those gaps are in good cause. If there aren't any gaps and we're not really seeing cases of, for example, harassment or cash for keys or other ways that folks are getting residents out, then in that case, then we wouldn't move forward with it.
Okay. Regarding rent stabilization ordinance, Pinole on paper is like 30% renters. Just putting it out there, how would you go about really getting the information on folks who are unofficially renting their homes? Yeah, just that's.
Yeah. I mean, good question. I mean, we'd love to try to brainstorm on particularly that hidden housing stock and hidden rental housing stock. Off paper leases. Casual arrangements. I do think hopefully the work that the rental inventory folks are doing is hopefully going to be helping with that. But that's a really great thing for us to follow up on.
Last comment question is. Next month, the County Developmental Disability Council, one of the presenters is going to be discussing affordable housing specifically for the disability community. I could send you information or send it to Dave to get it to you guys on there. I'm complete. Thank you.
We would love that, by the way.
Thank you, Commissioner Lamb. Julian, Commissioner Huey.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation and this very important work. My first question is about the CORE program. And so the first question says that has contracted, so the contract has been completed. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I believe we started that contract with them in June or July of last year.
And so these folks are already deployed and doing outreach actively?
Correct.
Okay. And I have a note that says that there's $500,000 annually put into this contract. Is that correct?
No. Oh, sorry. Yeah. That is not the correct amount.
Okay.
So within the Housing Successor Fund, the allotted purposes, one of them is for engagement and prevention of homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
So that set aside allows up to $500,000. I believe the city's contract with CORE currently is around $35,000. So definitely a reduction from that number. Yeah. So yeah, and again, we're currently sharing it amongst 4 cities. That number may change next year, but for now, that's the model that we've had. And they did a report out to City Council last month, and have a lot of great information there that are worth looking at.
And you said the contract was executed last year. And what is the term of the contract?
So it's a 1-year contract as kind of like the pilot. And then if it goes well, if we're happy, I believe sometime this year it will move to like kind of a 5-year model or a 3-year.
Okay. And then we talked a little about the housing successor funds, and I know that you said $35,000 was allotted to CORE, and the housing successor fund is again mentioned in the tenant retention program. Do you have an idea of the dollar amount that would be allotted there?
To those programs?
Specifically to the tenant retention program.
The tenant retention. So we're looking at examples from other cities. Obviously, some cities are better funded than others. For example, El Cerrito currently has $250,000 in that fund, and we're going to work with them or ask them sort of how is that getting drawn right now. And I think they have a maximum. It's $2,500. Is that the average?
That was the average.
So it's an average grant of $2,500 per person. I think we'd also be looking at Berkeley or other sort of cities that have these housing retention programs and try and figure out exactly what would be a decent amount to have in there so that it is a resource. We're also trying to understand what the need is as well to try to kind of guesstimate how much money would be drawn on an annual basis.
And then one more question, if I may. Is there flexibility for us to move the funds from one program to the other? So let's say, for example, that the core team does not annualize the full 35,000. Can you shift the remaining funds that was unspent into the tenant retention program?
I don't believe we would be able to do that, just because it's kind of a fixed contract. It's through the county, so it is very like kind of they're out here X amount of days, with 3 staff members that have a salary. But what I will say is the retention program should be essentially, because it is also keeping people housed is a great way to prevent homelessness, and so it falls under that same kind of set aside. So it's a pretty seamless chunk of change to be used flexibly towards the prevention of homelessness.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Minnis.
Thank you. So I've got a few questions. So first off, going back to page 21 at the start of the presentation, since the City of Pinole is acting as a housing successor to the redevelopment agency, which was dissolved and eventually, after it had its bond paid off, rejoined the city as a whole, for how long is the successor agency going to be an entity, and what fund streams does it have available to it?
I can't speak to the duration of it. My understanding is it is sitting between 3 and 4.5 million currently.
Okay.
David might be able to.
In terms of duration, I mean, once the funds are exhausted, then the funds are exhausted. So we're using these funds, these programs, these housing programs, and it is all part of the redevelopment. There isn't any really additional monies coming into the fund anymore. It's just now funds are going out of the fund. We have to use the funds as part of that, and as part of that was part of the agreement when the redevelopment agencies were dissolved, was that each of these cities would have because as part of the, I don't know if you're familiar with the redevelopment, but redevelopment had a mandatory 20% set aside for affordable housing. And so what they did was when they closed the redevelopment agencies, the state or the cities and the counties that had redevelopment basically fought for these housing funds, and so they were able to they developed the housing successor agencies to be able to use those funds for affordable housing if they followed the right procedures, which our city did, and we were able to keep our money in our housing successor agency, which would then now we need to expend those funds. So we have a number of years before we expend the funds before they get lost to the state. So I don't want to say it's 40 years because I don't want to, but it's a long duration of time from when we closed the redevelopment agency, that timeline started.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because some of the suggested policy recommendations are shorter term and some of them are longer term. So, the long-term viability of revenue streams and all that stuff is relevant. Let's see. So for core in particular, if the city maxed out its contribution, like it went all the way up to 500,000, which I know it's not currently, it's far less than that, but it would basically be able to sustain that level of contribution for 5 years, and then it would have to stop, basically.
Like, essentially, if it were to hit that maximum annual allotment,
right,
core of the 500,000 and keep doing that every year, that would eventually use up 3.5 in 7 years. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. I do believe some monies have been loaned out for developments that may eventually trickle back into the fund. But yes, that allotment, as I understand it, is it's an annual capped set aside.
Okay. So then on page number 25, it says, if the city pursues this type of program, it is likely that El Cerrito set aside within the Contra Costa Housing Successor Fund will be a great, and then the sentence ends. Was it supposed to have the word example there, or was there something else there?
Yeah, yeah, it's something like that. Let's see. So that's that first sentence.
Yeah.
See if else. I mean, it's a great model to follow after. And
Model, okay.
actually a contract to pursue.
So with the down payment assistance program, you mentioned that NCLT provides up to $200,000. I'm assuming that's on a per year basis, not a per purchaser basis.
Sorry, so it is a per purchase, and I should have been more clear also. It's a maximum of 200,000 or 40% of the home price, whichever is lesser. And it is a per property limit. We have so far had 13 transactions in the last 2 years. We currently have 2 in the pipeline.
And can you tell us what the average value of those transactions was?
Yeah, sure. I would say the range is roughly between $450,000 to $750,000, with most of the homes that folks are purchasing are between $500,000 and $600,000.
Right, and obviously the down payments you're providing are for a percentage of
Yeah,
that.
so the down payment assistance is usually between $150 and $200.
Okay. And how do the terms for that work? Is it just like a grant, a forgivable loan, a
Yeah,
loan
so
at a
it's
certain percentage?
it's a secondary loan on the property. So it's for 30 years. There are no payments on the loan, and it's forgivable at the end of the term.
30 years, low payments, forgivable. So do the payments then sort of regenerate the pool of funds you have to provide that program, or is there a separate funding source you have for that?
The funding source is the state.
Okay.
It's just a state investment in affordable home ownership. I think what it essentially does is create just a lower mortgage payment for folks.
So this is a state investment that's separate from the housing successor agencies, or it's also part of that
It's
same
separate.
pool? Okay.
It is separate. It's a state program through HCD. It's called the Cal Home Program. Cal, and then capital HOME.
And if I can add to that just real quick, those programs have been in the state for a long time. They're totally separate from the housing successor agency, and the state has been providing funds for that for the last 10 or 15 years. They've changed the name of it, the program, a couple of times. But as some of those programs, and I think the regs have changed a lot since and before it used to be that the homeowner would get the down payment assistance loan, and then depending on how long the person lived in the home, depended on if they had to pay back the loan, if they had to pay back the interest or the principal. I think now it's back to the 30-year paid if it's forgivable if after, it used to be after 15, but now it's, I guess, after the terminal loan. So depending on the terminal loan.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And the idea is the loan does get paid back if it gets sold within. I have to double check to see the number of years, but I think it's 5 years.
All right, and then moving on to, let's see, so sort of arbitrary evictions, you have that under rent stabilization and under just/good cause eviction. So are you using different definitions of arbitrary there?
I suppose so. I think what we'll really be talking about really is eviction through rent increase. So, for example, if someone maximizes their annual rental increase and also any sort of pass-through rent increases that 1482 does not prevent you from. So, just to go over 1482, it does allow for a maximum limit on the increase in rents, but there is no restriction on any sort of pass-through costs. as part of the bill. And so if you're, for example, this is not something I'm assuming happens in Pinole, and I'm just giving an example here of something where someone buys a building and they are making pretty significant improvements or changes or addressing potentially a lot of issues at the property. That's an expensive investment, and try and find ways to be able to pass on some of that cost to the existing residents, which is an allowed use under 1482. So we're thinking about trying to figure out what is a way that we can have enough protection for residents so that even if, for example, their building gets sold or something else like that happens, they won't be driven out through rent increases.
Okay, so under rent stabilization, you've got more of a against gentrification type effects as opposed to just arbitrary evictions under just/good cause
Correct.
protections. You might want, well, that's getting more to suggestions. I'll save that for later.
Yeah, soft evictions is another term that people will use for those kind of things.
Okay, and then the final bullet point was right to legal counsel. Is there generally a limit to how much legal counsel can be offered in a given year?
So this is actually a really good question. So right to tenant counsel, even though it's called right to tenant counsel, it looks very different depending on the jurisdiction. In some cases, it's just a grant to a legal aid fund to help support folks who are facing eviction and be able to have a resource center. In some cases, like obviously in a place like San Francisco, there's actually staff members, like attorneys that work for the city. That is essentially the same as if you were facing criminal charges. So it looks different depending on the jurisdiction and how folks want to structure it. Sometimes there are dollar limits per case. So for example, say no more than $2,000, no more than $3,000 worth of legal assistance. So this is actually something that we would love to get some feedback from this commission and from residents about as to sort of what kind of works. Also, we have to think about the fact that this is at usually county court, and so you might need to be using lawyers who are county, non-local, non-Pinole lawyers. So that's kind of the meat of this policy that we're trying to explore.
All right, then moving on to attachment A, the flyer of it basically says we need your feedback on affordable housing in Pinole. And it opens by asserting that Pinole faces one of California's most severe housing crises. And is your warrant for that statement the second sentence, the over half of extremely low-income households pay more than 30% of their income on housing? Or do you have other warrants for that assertion?
Give me 1 second. Yeah.
There you go. It's the flyers that Chloe made.
No, that's fair. I mean, I think we're looking at it in a sense of the context of just the housing crisis in the Bay Area, period. But I do think that maybe more precise language for future flyers could be used here to sort of help make sure that it's not quite as specific to Pinole and more generalized for the Bay Area as far as the housing crisis is concerned.
Yeah, because you could say, for example, Pinole faces one of the Bay Area's most severe housing crises, and that would be a less strong claim than saying we face one of California's most severe ones. Like if you're saying that, I'm going to want to see data points saying, like based on this study or this data set,
That's fair.
this percentage out of this, or we rank there, like the sort of data that says Pinole is the 6th most diverse city in California, that sort of data set, like if you're making a claim about California as a whole. It could be the case, but I want to be sure that we have concrete grounding if we're making that strong a claim.
Absolutely.
And then the policy recommendations, I like the way you've got it in both English and Spanish. That's good. I'm wondering if you could also possibly have it in at least the sort of headers in Tagalog and Mandarin, I believe, are the other major languages spoken in the city that are the primary non-English speaking households based on the last survey, I think it was. It would be a bit easier on the policy recommendations one than it would be on the affordable housing policies one, just because there's less raw text, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
And then I will add, so, well, first, these are much more expanded. These are like little 5x8 flyers. But for the events, we will be providing translation services at request. We have a contract with a provider who provides it in Tagalog, Mandarin, and Spanish.
Great, glad to hear that. So earlier you mentioned that the application the city submitted was a joint one with Northern California Land Trust and the Richmond Community Foundation. Could you go into a bit more detail about the Richmond Community Foundation's role in this program, if any?
Yeah, so I think the way I look at it is that I have 3 programs with 3 different main collaborators. So NCLT is the main collaborator on this policy guidebook. Richmond Community Foundation, they're aware of the situation. They have some insight where their expertise is relevant. Richmond Community Foundation is the primary collaborator with the Social Impact Bond and Home Ownership Program. So they run a very similar program out of the city of Richmond, have for the past 15 years or so. And so we are kind of modeling our program off of theirs and collaborating with them on the process of developing that bond. So for this program, they kind of have a much more kind of high level, providing some input, but not much beyond that.
I guess going back to page 24, so you're noting preservation, protection, and production, and it says that the first 2 programs focus on supporting community members currently are at risk of experiencing homelessness. So, core team and tenant retention program. Do you have a rough breakdown of how you think funds should be split between the various categories of preservation, protection, and production, or is that just something you're leaving up in the air at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'll let Asen speak to this as well, but I think that's a big piece of hearing what the community feels is more important. But I also think it's worth noting that the dollars kind of spread differently in those categories. For example, it costs less to preserve a unit than it does to develop a brand new unit. Things around tenant protections can be more impactful at the individual scale with smaller sums of money, like we're mentioning an average grant, for example, with the tenant retention program being around $2,500 or so. That's a life-changing experience for an individual that already has housing, but to somebody that needs something built, that's not much. So so there's a lot of factors that we don't really have a set thing right now, but hearing what the community feels is important and kind of factoring in, how dollars spread in each area will be kind of determining factors.
Yep. I think Jared pretty much covered it there. I will say, I think that some cities, particularly if they have a lot of recurring revenue coming from housing measures, do set those kinds of targets with the majority, if not the overwhelming majority, going to production. But in some cities, for example, in Berkeley, in San Francisco, San Jose, some of those measures are from the general fund, and while there are targets, the money is allocated on an annual basis. I can go into slightly more detail if you'd like. There's a couple of housing measures that have very set percentages.
I think we can maybe go more into that once we get into the comments section. Let's see. And I think that's all my questions for you for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chairmaness. I did have a couple of questions myself. Going through the list of the policy recommendations, which one of these, have these policies been implemented in nearby or comparable cities to Pinole, and what was kind of the impact on both market and production and preservation and such?
Do you want to talk about the in lieu?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of cities do have in lieu fees. One of the cities that we actually spoke quite a bit about their in lieu fee was the city of Berkeley, who have gone through some changes to theirs. Out of that conversation, we actually had the discussion to move our scale both on exemptions to the inclusionary fee and what potential in lieu fee would be, switching it from a per unit cap and per unit fee basis to a per square footage, because they've had some issues with I would say developers getting creative about how to minimize fees. They found square footage was just a simpler metric. A lot of, especially larger cities, do have these in lieu fees. San Francisco has a big one, Oakland. I think that's where they're really effective, is where, yes, the dollar amount might not equate to an exact per square footage thing, but when you have as much developed as some of these larger cities have, you're able to spread it a little more creatively. You're able to do some gap financing and stuff like that, where it actually has the desired impact of creating affordable housing without hampering development in general.
Okay, and then thank you for that.
Yeah, so I'll talk about some of the other ones. For the tenant retention program, this is a very common program. So obviously, we put in the example of city of El Cerrito. This is generally a very impactful on an individual household basis, and we can provide some data on research studies that have been done on housing retention programs and their impact on preventing homelessness. The other thing that I would say is that it tends to be popular not only, of course, for the residents, but also for housing providers who are able to, cure non-payment issues and in many cases be able to retain tenants that they've gotten to know. Down payment assistance program, of course, is both a statewide program, but some cities have their own down payment assistance programs. I will say the evidence there is mixed. It is definitely a program that allows for a limited number of people to benefit quite greatly from housing. However, as far as being able to create pathways for folks to be able to develop home ownership, it is a really, really effective program. Community land trusts, obviously I'm the executive director of a community land trust, so I'm pretty fond of them. But so this is definitely something that we think of as being a way for folks to really get that first step into housing or to be able to stay in the communities in which they live. So the value by just being able to reduce the cost of entry, you're allowing for almost a different class of folks to be able to purchase homes. So I'll give you an example about a property we recently had a turnover at. The initial purchase price was $68,000 for the home. It was in the early 90s, and the resident, sadly passed away, so we had a house to sell. We sold it for $180,000 in Berkeley, California, in 2018. So that's a completely different level of affordability for somebody to be able to step into. So we're really fond of them, of course, as a concept. For the rent stabilization ordinance, obviously, we've all been through rent control and rent stabilization conversations throughout the state. Obviously, there are ordinances in Richmond, Oakland, Berkeley, San Francisco, San Jose, and in Mountain View. And they all kind of take a different approach, and a lot of it is constrained by both AB 1482 and by Costa-Hawkins, the Costa-Hawkins Act of 1995. Finally, just cause evictions, we could quite literally copy paste it from almost every city around the Bay Area. I think more than half of the cities in the Bay Area have a good cause ordinance on the books. And then finally, right to legal counsel, I will say that is more specifically concentrated in the three largest cities the three largest cities in the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose, and in the city of Berkeley. I haven't actually looked at Marin County, but I will try to bring that back. Okay, so we're pretty sure. So that's a little bit more difficult, and going back to that cost conversation, that's a place where cost containment is really, really, really important, because it can become kind of a slightly more expensive program than people expect.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. And I did kind of have a little bit of a follow-up on the legal counsel one. Would there be kind of an opportunity for kind of like a joint, would it kind of thinking of like the city paying into a fund rather than the city having its own kind of program, or even kind of like a regional?
Absolutely.
A regional, whether it's the county or West County or East Bay kind of fund that the cities could pay into that would have attorneys or help pay for legal aid?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it really is kind of one of those programs that benefit, it benefits to have an entire county involved. There's also sort of lighter touch versions of this where you identify legal aid organizations that you can help support. And this is something that you could do either as one city or as multiple cities. But yes, absolutely, like a collaborative approach with other jurisdictions, I think would be absolutely the way to go.
And I'll add to that, the city, I believe, did finalize a contract with an organization, Echo Housing, which provides kind of tenant landlord services, both in kind of, they provide kind of work groups and getting folks educated on what their rights are, as well as dispute resolution supports and stuff like that. So don't quote me on it being finalized. I do believe it was finalized. So they're an organization we do partner with, and they work throughout the county as well, and would honestly be a great entity to continue conversation with.
Perfect. And then final one on the rent stabilization. How much different could a potential rent stabilization in Pinole look like compared to the state protections?
So I also want to make sure that I kind of talk a little bit about the difference between rent control and rent stabilization. And I just want to make sure. So, for example, for rent control, even though it is part of Costa-Hawkins, I just want to just reiterate that there is vacancy decontrol as part of all rent stabilization ordinances in the state of California. So if someone leaves a unit, the property owner is 100% allowed to reprice or reset the rent at market rate. So that would be one very important distinction. I just want to make sure it's clear. And then the second part of it is costs that a property owner incurs, either for utilities, for home improvements, and for various allowed uses, would still be included potentially as something that would be able to be recouped as part of rent increases on an annual basis. The difference would be around the annual set limit, and you can look around the Bay Area as to what other cities are doing. Generally, one rule of thumb is to look at what the CPI is, or just general inflationary measures, and that tends to be kind of the rule of thumb, but the numbers vary pretty widely across the Bay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that's all my questions. Are there any final questions from the commission? Okay, let's go ahead and do we have any public comment on this item?
There are no hands raised online at this moment.
I'll give it another few seconds. Any public comment?
None at this moment.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we'll take it back to the commission for feedback and comments. This time I'll start to my left with Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
So comment for the community engagement piece on the 7th and 13th, I would encourage some sort of infograph breaking down the extreme low, very low price points, just to make it more digestible and accessible for folks to really understand that. And then even to have more information for folks regarding, was it AB 1482? Just so they can refer to that as well. I want to say at that other housing, there was a presentation and it broke down that price point of the very low kind of bracket.
In terms of the housing element, well, I mean, the housing element has certain numbers in it regarding what the incomes were that were required for that. But I don't know about necessarily the purchase prices of buildings.
Yeah, what I would say is not so much for ownership, but so affordable units do have set rent fees at 30% of different tiers of AMI, annual median income, for the region. And so that is a breakdown that you will often see as the state issues it at the county level.
Yeah.
And so that might be what we're referencing, and that would be a great thing to put into anything we present.
And then just to add, what does the spread look like in Pinole? Because I know it's just a little bit different, just so folks have that point of reference of how do we compare to Contra Costa versus the Bay Area. And no, and I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you, and Commissioner Huey.
Yeah, so with the community engagement piece, I really appreciate seeing that Thursday, 7 to 9, that later in the evening time for folks who are working, gives them time to tune in, cook dinner, and be present to be able to contribute. In terms of the core team, I think it's a great idea. I'm very passionate and I advocate for outreach teams like this to go out into the communities and meet folks where they are to provide essential services. I love that it highlights health and basic needs services as well as permanent housing. As we know, housing is a precursor to good health and well-being for our community members. At the end where it says the outreach team identifies individuals living on the street, assessing their housing and service needs, and facilitate connections to shelter and services. I'm sure the county and you all have a great list of individuals and organizations that you can refer, and nonprofits that you can refer our folks to. I do hope that in part of that great contributors that we are also including our fellow managed care plans here in Contra Costa County. They are required, the managed care plans, if our residents have Medi-Cal, they are eligible to get enhanced care management, and that can include community supports, which provides interim housing and stability for unhoused individuals. So yeah, thank you all for your work on this. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, and Vice Chair Menace.
Thank you. So first, to follow up on Commissioner Lamb-Julian's comment, if you're going to be including more concrete numbers of the infographic, would it be possible to include basically what the AMI would look like for multiple different years as it changes over time? Because Pinole's AMI has changed pretty drastically even since 2020, just because the area median income has increased even as the number of people in Pinole has decreased. So that might help people to understand basically the breakdown of who falls in what categories and how that changes over time.
Yes, absolutely. We could do a retrospective look. I would be apprehensive about doing an estimate of what it could look like in the future.
Right, I'm not suggesting you try for a prospective look because, yeah, you don't really have the data for that. But I think we've got enough, we're enough years into the element now, but you have enough data points to be able to do a proper retrospective, I think. Let's see. So under rent stabilization, if I'm understanding what you were saying earlier, right, you're saying that AB 1482 and Costa-Hawkins and various other state laws limit what can fall under rent stabilization. There's always going to be vacancy decontrol. There's always going to be the ability to pass through actual costs of improvements. Setting aside those things, though, like, what are the, I guess, what is sort of the range of caps that's been implemented in Contra Costa County and West Contra Costa County in particular, I guess, or in cities of a similar size to Pinole? That might be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So for cities that kind of lower than, say, the city of San Jose or San Francisco, you're looking usually at CPI. And so, depending on the year, CPI is from 2 to 5%. Obviously, we've had, I think in 2023, it was up to 7%. So things do increase pretty dramatically depending on what the inflationary scale is. In cities with tighter rent control, it's a percentage. It's a percentage of CPI. So it's 50% of CPI, 80% of CPI, 60% of CPI. And so you do end up with a situation where, the rent increases the allowed rent increases are 0.6%, 0.8%, 1%, 1.2%, and those usually are the tightest ones. Before 1482, San Jose was at 5%. The city of San Francisco is at 60% of AMI of CPI, and the city of Berkeley is at 50% of 80% of CPI. And the city of East Palo Alto, I believe, is at CPI.
All right. Secondarily, just as a more general feedback comment, it would probably be a good idea to have like a PowerPoint presentation available when you're presenting this to, the commission and the council and other groups. Because you had a lot of good data in your presentation, but a lot of it was just in the packet. It wasn't showing up on screen for people to see on the broadcast or refer back to later. Let's see. I already went over the balancing categories. So under elderly population, you say 39% of elderly households are low income. In the AMI bracket, does that mean they fall in the low, very low, extremely low, all three of those, one of those?
It's below 80% AMI, but we can have a tighter breakdown if you'd like.
Maybe just say lower than moderate income, just to be clear, like where the line's being drawn.
Okay.
And then with the extremely low income group, you note that 2/3 face severe housing cost burden and overpayment. So where is the city getting that data from?
Where do we pull that from?
I don't doubt it, mind you, given, that income threshold and rents in the Bay Area, but.
Right. I'll have to follow up with you on the source.
Okay. Yeah, and in general, like, you've got a site to your source for like the NCLT housing workshop, the housing element, AB 1482. And that's good, but more sites and more direct sites are always beneficial, even on, info texts. Just because some people are only going to see that flyer and that's going to be the only thing they look at. They aren't going to bother to look it up online or whatever.
That's fair.
Let's see. And yeah, I guess that ties back into attachment A too. We've got over half of extremely low income households. And again, so is that data coming from the housing element? Is it coming from a survey the city's conducted at some later time? Like,
I'll have to go ahead and double check. I believe it was either a mix of data from the housing element or a census survey.
Yeah, because if it's census data, that's really helpful too, because like, okay, this is concretely what's happening at this point in time. When you're looking to create a guidebook, like how high level do you want the guidebook to be? Do you just want to have it be a list of programs? Do you want to have it go to the level of detail that, say, the city's general plan does? Do you want to have it go to the level of detail that, say, the city's municipal code does?
So generally, it's a policy document. So it's more of a overview, and you want to get to at least enough of a level of detail that particular pieces of policy are set, but allow for staff to be able to develop a finalized version of each piece of the guidebook to bring back at a later time. So, for example, I'll give you, pretty quick example would be for the tenant retention fund. We could come up with general parameters for that fund, but allow staff to develop a program. For example, select a vendor, work with other jurisdictions, so on and so on. So it really is more of a planning document rather than a sort of we're bringing back ordinances.
And I'll add, as a fellow here, my time ends in December, so I am vested in having them to a place where they will likely turn into actual programs in my absence.
Right, you want to have something concrete as part of your portfolio. Let's see. I think more broadly speaking that the overall way that you've categorized what needs to be looked at, under preservation, protection, and production is a good idea, because I think a lot of what the city has focused on historically has been the production side of things, just because, that's what the RENA numbers focus on, that's what the housing element focuses on. It's about, producing more raw housing, but it's also important for us to consider keeping people in their homes and keeping homes intact too. I know the city's focused a little bit on preservation since I want to say 2020. There have been some programs more specifically targeted towards home preservation for the elderly, I think, and some things like that. But the central category of protection's been more controversial. I think it's a good idea that we're focusing on it. I think it'll benefit the city to at least consider all four of these points, but just wanted to highlight that for people that column hasn't been done as much historically because it's been a higher conflict column. And I believe that's all my comments for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bender.
I just want to mention I appreciate your, when you're looking at other municipalities, that you're trying to limit them by and large to be similar to Pinole, because other study groups in the past have included other communities that the economic disparity is quite substantial, and you don't understand why that particular community was being included. That doesn't mean, though, I appreciate also you're looking at Berkeley, because there's always interesting things coming out of that city. A lot of it positive, as far as I'm concerned. And it's also a fact, frankly, there's a lot more development taking place there than here, for whatever reasons. And it's not all just affordable housing, a lot of it's market rate. I'm kind of saddened by the in lieu fee issue, but I understand it because it really is related to, and there's an economy of scale involved, and that's very understandable. You just look at projects in San Francisco and where the developers do the in lieu fee, and it's a substantial amount of money. We just don't have that scale of projects, so I completely understand that. I am a little pained, though, at the very lower level at the 4, because at some point there's a threshold in which projects, I mean, I can envision sites here in Pinole where you could have a 4 or 5 or 6 units, and a person who's developing it might say, well, it's not going to pencil out if I have to provide that. The units, the affordable units, as opposed to the in lieu fee. But I also understand where that's coming from. And that's my only comments.
Thank you, Commissioner Utch.
Can I?
Yes,
speak?
go ahead.
So we actually are looking at the exemption, at tweaking it. So were you hoping to see a higher unit threshold or a lower unit threshold?
Maybe just a wee bit higher.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because I do know at a larger level, some people are actually starting to question that number 4, because they are finding that the whole segment of projects are just not going to be happening, and there's a gap occurring in housing, and those projects typically, let's say if you're looking at a 4 unit, well, 3 will be market rate. And if there's developers finding I can't do it with the 4, with one of them being affordable, then those, you've lost 4 units altogether. And I do know that, again, at the macro level, that those conversations are starting to take place amongst people and the proponents of affordable housing, which I think is a good thing. Okay. Thanks.
Yes, Commissioner Utch.
My comment is, I really like, I would say, the mention of the community land trust. I feel like in terms of housing policy, we've focused a lot on production, which is important, and protections, but having the big thing about housing is, well, you need to have land, and land is one of the most expensive, I guess you could say, pieces in the puzzle of building housing, especially in the Bay Area, and I do appreciate the mention of that. And I guess this is going to lead my question a little bit. Previously mentioned how your group, specifically the NCLT model, in terms of running a community land trust, mostly deals in selling property that the NCLT owns, or also does that include rental properties that you maintain as like any other entity?
Yeah, so we do both. We also have a commercial property, so we're also a commercial property owner. 2/3 of our units are rentals, but they have a pretty high degree of resident engagement and self-governance as well. And 1/3 of our properties are condominiums or single-family homes. So we have a sort of very wide spectrum of housing opportunities, and we're currently actually trying to develop a ground up construction of rental land ownership.
Sorry, really appreciate that. You said the last point basically involving in housing production.
Yes, as well.
So I guess you could say in an honorable mention, then the community land trust sort of also fits in with, in terms of like the policy flyer of like housing production as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely one thing that we're really looking to explore is to do sort of a land trust with ground up construction, where the land trust, by owning the land, is able to maintain that affordability long term for ground up construction projects. Obviously at the scale of land trust, we're usually looking at fairly small developments, 25 or fewer units. But we see that as being a really good option for affordable home ownership. So townhouses, infill development, small condo buildings, for example. But we'd love to be able to partner with a traditional affordable houser to do a project eventually at some point.
Yeah, that sounds great, and that's all my comments, and thank you.
Thank you, and now for my comments as well. Thank you so much for being here. Housing is a very important issue for me, and thank you for all the work that you all are doing. I kind of see it as that I think there's a different way to kind of see it is in terms of the strategies. I think that there's some strategies that could kind of be implemented more at kind of like at the administrative level. I think that there's strategies that could be implemented by council at no cost to the city, and I think that there's the third one are obviously ones that cost the city funding, however much it would be, or however much council or the city decides to put into that. In terms of some of the strategies themselves, when I was still am, as a staffer in the state senate, I worked the rental assistance program. So I kind of saw what it kind of did at the state level and both at the county level back during the pandemic. So I kind of saw that I was able to get life-changing amounts of money for a lot of people, and that was all coming down from the state. There was obviously the rent moratorium at the time, but I kind of saw that there was a lot of people that got a lot of help, and it was really life-changing for a lot of people. So I think that would be a excellent strategy. But I do know that does cost a fair chunk of money. And I also kind of saw it in two counties. So I kind of saw it in Contra Costa that implemented the state program, and Alameda County that did a local program, and how they both kind of had different challenges and here in different ways. I kind of am also interested, I think, the city has done, some great work on production, but I think, preservation and protections are very important. I think that the city should pursue some of these strategies as well. As mentioned, the emergency rental assistance. As for like the legal right to counsel, I kind of think that could be more of like a regional thing. Not necessarily something that the city itself does, but something that the city pays either an org or kind of partners with other cities to kind of have a more regional legal fund. Obviously, lawyers can be very expensive. Pro bono lawyers can be, hard to come by, and also they might be stretched pretty thin as well. I do think the city should explore just cause eviction as well. I do know that can be a bit controversial, and it didn't pass the first time around. I think maybe the second time around, or hopefully not third time's the charm, but hopefully it could be done in the future. And I would be interested in also seeing kind of what a rent stabilization ordinance specific to Pinole could look like. As you had mentioned, under AB 1482, the limit of 10% could still be a lot. So kind of seeing what would be a reasonable percentage if Pinole were to ever have its own protections, whether it's kind of 1% plus CPI, 2% plus CPI, or like a flat rate, or some could be explored in the future. And I'm also a big fan of the down payment assistance. As a young professional, I can proudly say that I can't afford to buy a house in my own city. And that's not necessarily my employer's fault. I think it's just housing costs have gone up astronomically, and wages and salaries haven't really kept up with that. So if I could, I live with my parents, and I don't pay rent, but I couldn't really afford to buy a house, or enough to save up to have like a big enough down payment. Or if I decide to move out, I'd probably be paying half my income in rent, and that's not necessarily a good practice as well. I think that stronger protections for the renters that we do have in Pinole would be a great thing. And I also think that opening new gateways and making it easier to buy a home and have property, I think would be an excellent policy for Pinole to have. But I do understand that some of these policies cost money, and like $200,000 for assistance that's a lot, especially if the city's paying for that. But maybe it could be something where, like, if you qualified for the Cal Home, the city could give you an additional grant on top of that. Just potentially throwing that out there. Trying to see what else I had in my notes. Yeah, and I kind of see it as they're kind of different strategies that could be presented differently to council. Kind of like, this is what you can kind of do now without really doing too much. This is what you can work on, and then some things that could work more on the long run, things that could be worked on in the long run. Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
That actually just reminded me of something. I remember a few years back, I think, Councilmember Sasai mentioned something about social housing, basically the city directly owning housing stock. Is that something that you've considered as part of basically the policy set?
We're actually part of a social housing coalition, and we consider, CLTs to be part of that overall solution. But we're not including it in this policy set, primarily because I know there's a lot of state-led efforts. We are currently looking at, coalition members are currently looking at pretty large numbers on trying to make social housing happen in California. I think at the scale of the resources that we currently are looking at here in Pinole, we are not really looking at exploring that, just because at least, we think that at least currently the costs are prohibitive. But we'd love to at least, be able to do some informative or a session or a memo if folks are interested.
It seemed to me as though that could potentially tie into your in lieu fees and public land bullet point a bit, possibly.
Yeah.
Does that conclude your?
Yeah, that was just the one point I wanted to add in.
Yeah. And yeah, just another thing to kind of add on top of that, I think that these policies are very important because I think, if maintaining affordable housing and maintaining your housing in general is very, very key to preventing homelessness in a way. A lot of people can be, one missed paycheck or one unlucky circumstance or one bad situation away from being homeless. And I think that, some of these protections in place can prevent some of that. And I think it's kind of like a snowball effect where it's like all these little things can kind of add up and then all of a sudden someone's on the street. When, 6 months ago they had their house and everything was fine. But, just anything that the city can do and we can do as leaders to keep our housing affordable and also, prevent homelessness wherever we can. Preventing it and also more of our response strategies as well. So I think that concludes comments. Yes, Commissioner Lam-Julian.
Just in the vein of distilling this and making this more accessible for the community engagement piece. So the RENA cycle, I think, is every 7 years? Okay, just to really clarify that. And let folks know that the goal is to hit the 500 by 2030. So just the layman person understands, because we're eyeballs deep in this regularly, but just to the everyday person listening while they're cooking dinner, like, what does that mean? But just try to look through that lens of just how can we make this super simple and digestible for folks so they can participate.
And make sure it's 2031. Yeah, that's our housing element cycle.
What did I say?
2030. We need that extra year. Don't short us on that year. Don't short us on that.
I'm complete, thanks.
All right. We do not have any recommended action tonight, so I believe if there's any other from the commission, I believe that would conclude our.
Yeah, and then when the policy guideline comes back, then you will be making a formal recommendation to the city council once the guidebook comes out and the full thing. So we appreciate the commission's comments on this, and I'm sure they've got more than enough information to load into their policy documents. And so, so there's no official action tonight.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for being here and for all the work you do.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you, guys.
All right. With that, we will go backwards in our agenda to item H, our old business, information on police department crime reporting data.
Yes, say don't forget me. All right. All right.
Thank you. Do we have a Yep.
Yes.
We have a presentation on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, tonight before you, we have an item that's coming back. It was a request from the Planning Commission to look at how the police department views projects as part of the conditional use permit and public convenience necessity items for alcohol sales within the community. Over the last couple of years, the city, we've had a number of projects that have included alcohol sales, whether they have been upping their license from selling beer and wine to selling beer, wine, and spirits, or having restaurants coming in and that same thing, or just stores selling beer and wine. So, and with that, there's a process that the city goes through. The city regulates alcohol sales through Chapter 17.59 of the Pinole Municipal Code, which basically requires the applicant to complete a two-step process. One is a conditional use permit process, and the other is a public convenience necessity. For each of those processes, there are findings that are required, and each of the processes require information from the police department regarding crimes in the area and whether new crimes, or whether the new applications will increase crime at those locations. The PCN process is mainly, it's public convenience necessity. That is put by the council. The reason being is that if a census tract is oversaturated with liquor licenses, state law requires that there be some type of convenience finding made. Because we have that in our code, that's the process that we find, and that's approved by the city council. If the city council does not approve that public convenience necessity, then the project stops right there. There is no further action to take with it. If they do approve the public convenience necessity, then the applicant must follow through with the conditional use permit process as part of the review of the planning commissions. And so that's usually how that works. The information, most of the in the last few years, with the Anabi Shale Station and the Diosa restaurant, the Planning Commission was asking for what type of matrix or what type of information does the police department use to determine these findings. The findings that are made basically are from Municipal Code Section A3 as part of the conditional use permit, which states that the extent to which the crime reporting district in which the subject site is located exceeds the average for crime reporting districts subject to the jurisdiction of the police department. That's the one finding. The other finding that's usually made regarding the police department is which states that the police department has reported the proposed establishment would not be expected to add crime in the area. Okay, I included the kind of the staff report, the final staff report with the Anabi sales, because that's what in the beginning what we thought we were looking at is how crime would increase in the area. These were all calls. I mean, if you look at table 1 that I referred to in the staff report, those were all the crimes or incidents that were reported within the Fitzgerald corridor, as you remember, and then what actually or required in Pinole, and then how much was happening in the Fitzgerald Drive corridor within Anabi sales. We concluded that the police department concluded that with the conditions of approval that were added and the security measures that were added to the building or to the business, that the rate of crime for that area wouldn't add additional crime to the area. What I've done is over the past couple months is I've met with the police department and kind of got a little more detail in terms of how they, what is that process? And so basically what's happened is that, and a lot of cities use this, police departments use this, the police department uses what they call the CPTED process, which is crime prevention through environmental design, which basically it's a method of crime prevention. The police department has come out and they've said, and they can't predict crime. They can't predict future crime of what crime is going to happen based on these uses. And they can give an estimate, but it's nothing that they don't have a concrete number. So what they do is that they try to use it through crime prevention, which is what this CPTED process does. Right? It's a multidisciplinary approach to reducing crimes and fear by designing the built environment to maximize natural surveillance, control access, and reinforcement territorially. They do this on all commercial and residential projects as well. Sometimes you'll hear the phrase in like single-family developments of like daylight cul-de-sacs, or you'll see where, you know, in stores that the windows are smaller, a lot smaller, so that less can be broken. I mean, just a lot of different design concepts. And so as researching SEPTED, and basically it states that it's a multidisciplinary approach to reducing crime, of designing built, to maximize natural surveillance and control access, reinforce territorially. It tries to deter criminal behavior by enhancing visibility, promoting legitimate activity, and fostering a sense of community ownership, often resulting in lower crime rates and improved quality of life. And so there are 5 different principles that they use as part of this process: the natural surveillance, natural access control, territorial reinforcement, maintenance and management, and then the 5th in activities and supports. And with that, the strategies that they're looking at potentially are, you know, for the natural surveillance, installing windows overlooking parking lots, using low landscaping, 3-foot rule, nothing over 3 foot, installing proper lighting to eliminate blind spots, right? In terms of natural access control, some of the strategies they would use, but using walkways, fences, and landscape to create a clear single point of entry and locking doors and windows. The territorial reinforcement, which is basically to clear a clear distinction between the public and private spaces, and strengthening a sense of ownership, which encourages residents to defend their space, which they use as fences, signage, landscaping, and pavement designs that clearly define property boundaries. And of course, maintenance and management, a well-maintained area signals that space is cared for, creating a sense of guardianship that discourages vandalism and criminal behavior. Basically, strategies of that for the business owner, you know, properly repairing broken lights, removing graffiti, which they're required to by the city ordinance anyway, as fast as they can, as well as maintaining landscaping, kind of the broken windows theory. So, you know, as long as they're keeping the center up to date, and that would help to deter crime. In terms of activity support, this principle involves designing spaces to encourage legitimate social activities, which increases the presence of authorized users and reduce opportunities for crime. And how their strategy for that is basically seating in public areas, hosting community events, and creating functional, high-use public spaces within their areas. So meaning that if there's a lot of people always around, that usually crime is usually deterred in those areas. How those are implemented basically are through our conditional approval process. So when they recommend conditions of approval, they have gone through the SEPTED process that they feel that whatever let me back up. When we submit projects, the police department reviews those projects. They're using this method. They then recommend conditions of approval of that project that would quote, help deter crimes, which then allows us to be able to make the findings that we need to make as part of the PCN and the conditional use process. So that's what they're using for that. I have Commander Justin Rogers on the Zoom tonight. He's with us actually to ask questions, and so I mean this is kind of more of a back and forth, just kind of a. There's no formal action being taken tonight, but we wanted to give the commission the feedback that they were looking for, and so that we could then have, you know, move forward. So that when you see, because we're going to have a lot of projects with alcohol sales, that when you see the conditions of approval, you'll see that they are, you know, they're using this process as part of their review of the project, and we can make those findings. So, with that, that's all I have tonight for you. Commander Rogers is online with us. We might want to pull him up in case I know there's going to be questions and all that. So with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. And if you have any questions of staff, be happy to answer those. And then of course we have Commander Rogers on the line as well.
Thank you, Planning Manager Hannah, for that. Now let's go to questions from the commission on this. Commissioner Bender.
No questions.
Commissioner Utch.
No questions.
Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
Okay, so for clarification, the police department is using the SEPTED as indicators for anticipated or just opportunities for crime, right?
Well, they're using them to try to use those methods to deter crime and make sure they're allowed as part of, like, we include those as conditions of approval.
So then when the report comes back that there's no indication that allowing beer and wine to be sold on the premises would increase crime levels in this, or this is what they're using?
That is what they're using.
Okay. And then for clarification, in the report, it said not exceed the average level of crime reporting district. So then, as just a layperson, what is the average crime reporting in that district?
Well, the problem is that we don't have districts per se anymore. It's
Okay.
more of beats. Those beats change over the course of time, depending on population, in terms of activity, in terms of those types of things. So that finding, I think, probably needs to be a little refined in terms of what we're doing for modern times. I mean, even though that was updated in 2010, I think that was one of the findings that got carried over from the zoning code back in 1996. So I think there's probably some room to kind of redirect that, but I'll have Commander Rogers talk about the districts and that, so that, because he has a better understanding of the beats and what that's about.
Sure. So our city's broken up into 3 beats, and that just means 3 areas of responsibilities for the officers that are on duty. The beats have officers assigned on all 4 of our shifts, so they don't typically go outside that area. They're mainly responsible for that area. Fitzgerald and Appian and the Fitzgerald shopping corridor is one of our busiest beats. However, that said, a lot of our activity up there is typically theft. In fact, in the last week, our business report went out and it had 12 business-related thefts. None of them were alcohol-related. And of those 12, there were 7 arrests made. So it's a pretty busy area. That if you would like a map of the beats just for future reference, I can definitely get that to you.
So, no, I believe that's online. So my question would be if you can help me understand in the report that we receive when it comes to the Planning Commission that it says does not exceed the average for crime reporting. So if you could just clarify, what does that mean? And then the other point would be also in the report, the conclusion that would not significantly contribute to the crime statistic. So just as a layperson, my understanding is you're using ZepTed to go ahead and look in that area to make sure that you're going to deter crime using this metric, right? But then in the report,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
So then in the report, it says no indication that it would increase, and then it notes the average crime reporting, and then no significant contribution to the crime statistics. So then if you could help me understand that, of just what the no indication would be and the not significant.
Sure. So no significant increase would be like a similar type business. This adding to this population of similar businesses is not going to increase the crime rate associated with those types of businesses. Basically, the beer and wine sales. Anybody who's selling it off-site. As for SEPTED is not necessarily or is not used to project what crime might be necessarily. It's just ideas that we put out on when the businesses are trying to set up their business to give them a best the best way to prevent crime at their business. So that's where a lot of those environmental designs come into play. We aren't like foreseeing any type of crime through SEPTED. If we had, back on the first part of your question, if we had a liquor store that was seeing a large amount of theft, for instance, then we would go out and use SEPTED to help them come up with ideas to make their environment less likely to be victimized.
So then the thought process would be if the establishment had an uptick of theft, alcohol-related theft, then the police department would come out, use SEPTED, and help the business owner look at ways to minimize the theft. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And then how, if you could just help me understand the rationale of when you're making the report and you're looking at the CUP to determine that it is not significant, is because that there has not been an uptick of theft related to alcohol sales reported, and then it's not anticipated because they haven't had any increase?
Right, because of crime trends, there hasn't been an increase. So when we were posed the question originally, we were able to take a look at our majority of our establishments that were involved in alcohol sales and look at their I guess base crime rate, calls for service essentially that have gone on there, and across the CAD system, when we check those locations, there has been a pretty consistent level. So there's not it's not foreseen that any particular one location has been having more problems than the other. Did that answer the question?
Justin, if I could add, so for example, let's just say and I'm helping out Commissioner Lamb Julian on this one. For example, you've got 5 liquor stores within the Fitzgerald area, right? And then liquor store number 6 is coming in, or so what you're saying is that based on the crime of the 5 other ones, that you're saying that this 6th one, you're not feeling that that's going to add any additional crime that's not already there? Or is it that by using your SEPTED message and our conditions of approval and all of that new store, that new service isn't going to create a significant increase in crime?
Right. Well, it's kind of a combination of both. Looking at those 5 businesses in your example, they're right. Kind of level. They're pretty level across the board. Adding a 6 is not going to make, we do not foresee that would make a difference in the crime rate related to those types of businesses. With the conditional use and using SEPTED, we would only make it less likely as long as they follow the plan, which typically, I don't know that anybody has had an issue following the plan, especially because it's part of their conditional use.
Okay, yeah, just my concern, just like Planning Manager Hannum stated, just we know that there's going to be an increase of other businesses coming before us wanting, to increase liquor sales or what have you. And we don't have the proof points to show, because there has not been a trend already to be able to make that determination, because we have not reached that threshold or what that average is for crime related to alcohol.
Right. I think that's, a good summation. It's like if we saw, for instance, in Beat 1, so down on San Pablo Avenue, some of our businesses that sell alcohol down there, if we were seeing like robberies and thefts from those stores, overall citywide it might skew the number, but when we break it down by beat, we're going to just see that rise is just in that one beat area versus if adding an extra one on, let's say, Fitzgerald. If we were adding one, let's say, on Fitzgerald, it probably wouldn't make a difference in that Fitzgerald corridor, most likely.
But what would happen if that store was on San Pablo?
Right. So if we were seeing an increased trend of robberies and thefts and whatever issues that the police were responding to at those locations, then we would probably be able to say, hey, they're already having issues, and if we bring in more of these type of businesses, we're just going to increase the problem down there.
Which, if that were to happen, I'm following this all the way through. If let's say you were to do that, and then you guys would come back to us basically and say, look, there shouldn't be one down here. We wouldn't recommend that you have another one down here. I mean, would that be kind of the recommendation that would come back from the PD, or would it be that well, if they follow these steps and this, it's not going to add to the increase because of all of their environmental design stuff that we condition the project? I mean, I guess that's what I think that's where the commission is struggling, is that in most cases, I think over the citywide, we're not having really issue with, maybe with alcohol sales, but maybe one area it could be. And if that area is, how would you guys report that back to us, saying that, yeah, based on issue, it's an oversaturation. These guys would have to go through, conditions 1 through 65 to make it a better place to live down there, or you would say we recommend that this conditional use permit shouldn't be approved because of the increased crime in that area for alcohol sales.
Yeah, I think that we would probably not want to add to that problem, and we would look seriously at sending our community outreach unit and maybe reaching out to code enforcement to go and help the current businesses with SEPTED. And then maybe once we saw a reduction in crime in that area and also the SEPTED improvements, then we could talk about adding another business down there.
So just my concern is that we're having this conversation because ABC said there's an oversaturation. It gets kicked up to City Council. City Council approves it. So then community members have raised concerns that, one, they know ABC said there's an oversaturation. Two, Pinole's only 5.15 square miles, right? So it's not that big of a land space. So we're looking at the average is 29% of crime reported in this area. So then the question is, what is the average of the area that would then flag as a concern for us to be proactive versus reactive to where the situation has already come?
Right. But so the problem, it sounds, is that the oversaturation is not our crime necessarily related to this business. And I think that, that's not a subject I weighed upon when asked the question, but I think that if ABC is worried about oversaturation in the citizens, then that's a discussion that we would have to have that's unrelated to that crime, because we're not showing the crime like we were just talking about, where there's an increased crime, and bringing in another place to be able to say, yeah, there's not only is it oversaturated, but it's also not a good idea because of public safety.
Correct. So I guess that was my question, to where maybe moving forward, we make the recommendation that when it goes up to the police department to make the report, that taking consideration that did it trigger an oversaturation from ABC, and then looking at the average crime reporting in that area, and then are we flagging the ones that are related to alcohol sales or incidences for clarification?
I can answer the ABC oversaturation issue. Basically, the ABC regulates alcohol permit, ABC licenses through census tracts. That's how they do that. Because Pinole is in about 5 or 6 different census tracts, and we are the small portion of those census tracts, it gets oversaturated very quickly. So, and also in most cases, when you have like let's say downtown or some type of community area where there's a lot of alcohol permits within a certain area, it gets oversaturated pretty quickly. That's why ABC has that public convenience necessity provision to let the local agency kind of decide, hey, look, it's okay based on these findings that we make, and then we go through the conditional use permit process to allow them to do that. So, I mean, unless ABC has determined that is a total, I mean, ABC has the total control over how many really licenses come into the city. I mean, they can unilaterally say, okay, that's it, you're done. But until they do that, that's why we have the public convenience necessity process. And we are oversaturated based on the census tracts, but you need to take a look at with Anabi, there were like 3 or 4 businesses that were outside of the city limits, but were in the census tract, which caused it to be oversaturated. Right. So I think that's actually in the report. I don't think that table's in there, but there were, and that was a couple of reasons why it was oversaturated, because there were 3 or 4 that were outside of the city. So I just want to explain the census, the public convenience portion of it, not the crime part.
Right. No, because as community members are concerned, like, so Anabi is right there off of, was it 80? And then you have Bevmo, and then you have Target that also sell alcohol at the same time. So when we're looking at the theft, is theft flagged, or is there a little asterisk noting that it had to do with alcohol sales? I think just if anything, the community members were concerned that, people can bop in, grab whatever they want to grab, and then leave, and then that would then be a smudge on Pinole, and to where it looks like we're just an easy target because we're right off of 80, with, 3 of those establishments right there off of the freeway, and then they can leave. In that really, really busy shopping center that we also already know it's got, 31% of the theft, and just trying to get clarification for that.
Yeah.
Okay, I am complete, and then we can, I guess, kind of noodle on the wording about just clarity from reports.
Right.
Okay, I'm complete. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Huey.
Thank you for being with us at 9 o'clock at night. Your voice is also very soothing, very podcasty. It's helping me to gather my thoughts here. I wanted to follow up on a point of clarification when you were answering Commissioner Julian's questions about crime rates. Are you using crime rates and number of incidents interchangeably? Because 3 out of 10 is 30%, but also 30 out of 100 is still 30%. So I just wanted clarification on that.
Sure, that's a great question. Calls for service are typically the first thing I look at, or we look at when we're inquiring about activity in an area. So with those calls for service, then we can separate those out to actual crimes. So they are 2 separate items, and they're going to produce 2 separate numbers. We could get a whole bunch of calls for service, for instance, due to an alarm, let's say at the old Kmart building, and we're out there multiple times a week on an alarm. But then when you go and look at the crimes, there might be, over a 6-month period, 1 vandalism, and that's just hypothetical, of course, but so to answer your question, I would probably give you 2 numbers if you wanted to know the exact calls for service and the crime rate.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful, because I think as we're considering crime rate versus the number of incidents, I mean, the impact is very different. My second question is referring to page 19, that table. The data collection starts in October and goes through December. What is the reason that we chose that specific time frame?
I can answer that question. When that was regarding Navi, that was because that was the holiday season. So we started it from October through Halloween, a little bit before Halloween, and then followed it all the way through into Christmas, because that was the most highly populated time of year that aired, and that was the time of year about when Anabi was coming in. So that's why we picked that. That was just that time of year that we picked. That's all.
And as a follow-up question to that, is it true that retail theft increases significantly during the holiday season compared to any other season in the calendar year?
Significantly, I would have to get back to you on the answer to that. Does it increase? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. And I'm asking this because in Table 1, we pull out theft specifically as a crime, and I want to get clarification as to what the other crimes were as it relates to this specific area. And I'm wondering if the time frame of data collection impacts the severity of the crime theft compared to other crimes.
Sure. Yes, and I would imagine that that time frame does impact the calls for service and the crimes that are being reported. As for whether the types of crimes are, strictly theft, or if there's an uptick in any other, like DUI drivers, for instance, I would have to get that for you. Unfortunately, I don't have our CAD system available when we're remote, or even in some places inside the city. So I apologize for that.
Understood. I appreciate it. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Vice Chair Menace.
Thank you. So I have a few questions. So first off, going back to perhaps forward to page 16, you have basically SEPTED, and I've got sort of two questions linked to that. First, do you have a way of measuring SEPTED efficacy after the fact? Like, for example, we think it reduced this many crimes over a 5-year period, or it prevented this, or this is a notable example of how it did what, or is this just based on, sort of multidisciplinary approach like the report says?
I'm going to let you answer that, Justin.
Sure. Sorry, I was looking up something. I apologize. So typically there's a time frame set. I think it depends on what the ask is of the business on how much time they are given to make their improvements. For instance, if it's something as simple as, have you ever gone to a liquor store and you try to look through the window, but there's so many ads in the way, and really the community outreach unit says, hey, if you took those ads out of the window and cleared up at least 80% of the window surface, then it would make it less likely that somebody would see you as a target because there's more visibility. So if the COU unit writes that up and says, okay, we'll come back in a week and see if you've been able to make any changes, then we would set that time frame. But would we see a difference in the crime stat? I don't know that that we've used any type of measurement for that beyond activity, calls for service, and crime in the area. And then what we typically do besides SEPTED is, try to do crime suppression and have our units kind of in that area to help bring that number down. And that could be something that takes a month or takes 6 months. Just depends on the type of crime and activity that's going on and how the officers are operating based on other calls for service that take them away from that area when they're trying to saturate an area. So it's hard to measure, but I think that if we set a time frame and we set goals for our officers and for the businesses in terms of the SEPTED, then we can probably see the difference within a few months.
Okay, and then secondly, with regards to basically setting up SEPTED, do you have something like a system of points for SEPTED? Like, for example, this method of natural access control gets you 3 points, this one gets you 5, having these cameras gets you another 2 across categories. Are you basically trying to have a threshold of points for people to reach, or is it just like, based on our past experience, we think you need cameras here?
About that, there's an assessment form that is used where they do kind of a security survey. They make suggestions on the form. There's not necessarily a point system. It's just a service essentially where we're going out and we're making suggestions for the business to become less of a target and even more appealing to the community. So I guess the short answer is no, there's no point system.
Okay, I was just wondering because we often see things like that, like the objective design standards and things like that. So I guess that's been on my mind a bit.
Yeah, we could definitely explore that. I see where you're coming from with that, and I do think there's a place for that for sure. It would probably help the community outreach unit with deciding, who needs their guidance first,
Yeah, I mean, even if you don't want to break down points for like individual SEPTED things, you could also have like a point scale for vulnerabilities. Like you have a completely blacked out window, that's like 3 points. And then you've got like only one entrance exit, you've got darker parking lot, you've got all these different things. And then you could have, so you could have a cross comparable sort of metric rather than trying to do more qualitative analysis. Let's see. I think the root reason that we asked for this item to come back, though, was not necessarily about SEPTED itself specifically, but about basically sort of where the line's drawn that we say not expect it to add crime in the area. Because I remember that was a potential point, because like when we're making that finding, is it we don't expect there to be any new crimes there at all. We don't expect there to be more crimes than there already are on average from the other businesses in the area. We don't expect it to be an excessive amount of new crimes. Like what all falls under would not be expected to add crime in the area?
Yeah. It's a hard question to answer. I think that we would have to really look at, I don't know if we have anywhere that's similar to where this proposed permit would be that we could even measure against, maybe Chevron or something like that, where there's a freeway on and off ramp nearby, and kind of see what their rate is versus Shell's current rate of theft or other crime going on in that area. So there probably is a way to measure it. I don't know off the top of my head how we would do that, though.
Thanks for clarifying that, because that was definitely one of the major questions that I had. Let's see. And then I guess the other point, average for crime reporting districts. Does the exact language of districts versus beats actually matter that much here? I mean, it seems to me, just like reading it from a lay perspective, that when you're saying crime reporting districts, you could just as well say crime reporting beats and it would be about the same thing.
Yeah, Dave, when he wrote that in there, I'm guessing that it was along the same lines.
Yeah, I'm assuming. Yeah, I'm assuming it. I'm assuming it was. I mean, it's just the district is kind of like the old terms that they've used back in the days. The districts but yeah, beats and districts I think can be used interchangeably, at least the way because it's a defined area within the city. So whether it's a district or a beat.
And just a little further clarification, typically we would see districts in much larger areas where they have beats inside of districts, but in our case, it would be interchangeable.
Well, I mean, we could just say the city of Pinole is the district, and we have 3 beats within the district. So,
well, that would get around the issue of average for the crime reporting districts, because there's only one district, and therefore you're always within the average for that district.
Exactly. There we go. We'll make it work.
All right. I think that's all my questions for this item for right now. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you. I'm going to check back to my right. Commissioner Bender, did you already ask your questions?
I have no questions.
Commissioner Rich? Okay, thank you. Just wanted to double check. Thank you, Commander, for being here. I did have a couple questions. I think you had already mentioned it earlier, but just wanted to confirm if there had been any uptick in crime since the alcohol licensing, and I think if it was related to alcohol or not, to the sales.
And you're talking about for the Shell
Yes.
station?
Yeah.
There has not been an uptick of crime there. And I looked over the past 3 months, and I also checked our business reporting reports that we put out weekly.
Okay, thank you. And then I did have another question. What are some examples of kind of when a business kind of doesn't follow the SPED, the crime prevention through environmental design? If there's any examples of kind of things that where a business, not particularly one in Pinole, but an example of like when it wasn't followed, and what that kind of resulted in, and kind of what made an area more susceptible to crime, if that makes sense.
Typically, the number one problem when they don't follow it is that they continue to fall victim to crime and other issues like getting attention from code enforcement for. Sometimes it could be some accepted suggestion about, hey, the landscaping's overgrown and you can't properly access the door or get in and out, and so then it's be something that you could see code enforcement taking action on, and then there might be a punitive cost to that. But my understanding of accepted is that there's no punitive action. It's mainly suggestions to help make the community better and the environment better around the business.
Sounds good. Thank you. Those are all of my questions. Any other questions at this time? No. All right. Let's go to public comment. Do we have any public comments on this item?
Yes, I do see one hand raised online. It's a caller with the phone number ending in 5748. So when you are ready, please press *6 to unmute.
And just as a reminder, the time allowed is 5 minutes.
Hello,
Yes, we can hear you.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I want to push the envelope here or jump the gun, pardon the pun. But the Fitzgerald Drive corridor being it's one of the highest district area corridor beats for crime. What proactive things does the police department do? Granted, I think we're short 1.5 police officers, if not maybe 2, I don't know. And then the restrictions on budget, maybe there's some morale problems in the police department, as well as less citations that are being issued in that corridor. And, we reduced the city council voted to reduce the speed limits, but they didn't vote to increase they didn't vote or audit the increase in citations due to the reduction of speed limits, other than the fact I understand the police department tended to give out more warnings. But, these perpetrators that come in over the freeway or from another town or enter Pinole through Richmond and Fitzgerald Drive, if they know they're not going to be stopped for speeding, running stop signs and stop lights, and therefore they just step up their game to go into certain retailers that have a no arrest policy, and I'd say the majority of the large retailers, big box and otherwise, aside from the small liquor stores, and maybe them, they don't have a no arrest policy or even a warning. And I know myself and other people called out shoplifters, say in a Save Mart or Lucky Store, Food Max or whatever Safeway. They say, oh, we can't do anything about that. You know, they don't even lift a finger to call the police till after they left the parking lot or when they're getting in their car at the parking lot. So obviously the crime rates would go up by then, and it has a poor lighting and police presence, or lack of police presence, and been a factor, because I know a lot of small businesses might not have proper lighting. So I guess you can advise them of that, or they have to take it upon themselves to use their own security cams, because it's my understanding that at one time we had 35 some odd cams in the city, but the police department didn't want to tell the public, or anybody for that matter, with signage or what have you, that a certain beat or certain area of parking lot or public right-of-way was being surveilled by cameras, other than maybe the skate park out there on Pinole Valley Road kind of thing. So and then also, I think the police might be hurting themselves and the city by not parking more of their cars. They're going to have more available cars when the city has to foot a big bill to buy these new vehicles. They should keep a couple, 3 vehicles to use them as you know, decoy dummy vehicles to have more police presence visibly in and around the Fitzgerald corridor. And I know you do that a lot during the holidays, but on a regular basis, and even have your officers out there doing their police reports in front of the Target or in front of the Lucky parking lot or down by Home Goods and Bevmo, but not to hide behind Applebee's or somewhere behind the Sizzler in a pardon the pun, a dead area where no one's going to see their car while they do their police reports. They can do their police reports.
30 seconds remaining.
And at the same time, they're just the presence of the car there. I don't understand that. You know, I know maybe they'll get it interrupted by the public, but maybe that's something good. They have to get interrupted by the public in the parking lot if someone's being assaulted or being robbed in broad daylight or at night if there's no police presence or the vehicles aren't there.
Please wrap up your comment. Your time is up.
I'd like to know what kind of security cams we have out there at present and how many of them are broken, because the rumor was there's 30 some odd.
Thank you. Your time has unfortunately expired. Do we have any other public comment?
There are no other comments right now.
Thank you. If the commander wanted to respond, or if city staff wanted to respond to any of that.
I mean, just to answer his question on the cameras, I do last count, I think we had a total of 40 citywide. We had 42 cameras, and I do believe that there's 3 that are not operating right now, and we're working to solve that problem with not only in our budget but also working with city IT to kind of figure out a reasonable fix that's affordable for the city. So we're working on it. And also, like I had talked about just on his other note about officers' activity, you know, last week, for instance, there were 12 crimes reported at the businesses on Fitzgerald, and the officers made 7 arrests out of that. I thought that was pretty impressive. I think that we've put a emphasis on getting back to writing citations. I think there was a systemic problem throughout law enforcement during and after COVID, where people were not, because officers were not as productive, that they were not writing tickets and enforcing traffic across the board, across the country. And we've really been making strides to promote traffic safety and also getting people citations when applicable. So thanks.
Thank you for that. And with that, we'll go back to final closing comments from the commission, and we'll start to my left with Commissioner Lim Julian. Any comments?
No further comments. Thank you.
Commissioner Huey?
So, I support local businesses and activation of new businesses and expansion. I just want to note that, alcohol sales are not always neutral. They carry well-documented public health safety impacts that we should proactively be planning for. And if we can acknowledge that, especially in this instance, we cannot predict the future impacts and crime related to this, that kind of suggests that maybe there's an opportunity for the city to establish clearer guidelines or broaden non-traditional risk indicators for consideration. For example, health and crime are linked hand in hand. We know that excessive alcohol consumption, which can be exacerbated by increased access, can lead to poor health, and poor health has been linked to increases in crime. So beyond crime statistics, perhaps the city can also consider reviewing alcohol-related ER visits, domestic violence that were involved with alcohol use, etc. And maybe if we see that there is an increase in those indicators, this may also lead us to conclude that there could also be a risk of increasing alcohol sales. I am guilty of enjoying a glass of wine here and there. So, I understand it's inevitable for this to happen, and it's part of economic vitality. I don't have a formal request or any expectation at this time, but just wanted to offer that perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Menace.
I would suggest in response to Commissioner Hugh's comment that if we want to include public health impacts, I think we should probably do that separately rather than trying to link it to crime sort of indirectly, because there are lots of public health impacts that aren't going to be crimes or that shouldn't be crimes, frankly, but that still have broader impacts on the community. That's why CEQA has these whole broad categories of impacts of things that, aren't crimes, but still make the community worse. So I think maybe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong about this, what you're looking for isn't necessarily talking about what the police department can evaluate, but more saying would not be expected to be detrimental to public health. Because I think there's some public health and morality clauses in the public convenience and necessity evaluation, right?
We'd have to check out I'd have to check the code. That's what I was going to try and pull up. But yeah, there are other findings throughout that you would be able to use more of the environmental type of things for those findings. But let me, we can get those to you to kind of just take as more of an informational of getting you all the findings that we use to both do the public convenience necessity as well as the conditional use permit and and of course, I mean, it's in chapter 17.59, and there are also required conditions of approval for all of those, for those uses as well. So that are also mandatory as part of the ordinance. So are you pulling it up, Justin, or are you, okay. So yeah, so I mean, so there could be, ways of amending the findings if you want, or, or looking at when we are reviewing those projects that we include some of that, those types of issues within the area. The problem that we will have is that, 'cause I've worked for a city where we tried to do this, is that we're tied to environmental. The problem is that is alcohol being bought from that store? So, or is it being bought somewhere else? I mean, that's kind of a narrowing it down of where it did. So that's from a general perspective. I think you're right. I think we do need to take a look at that, but it's going to be very hard when an individual business comes in and we link that to them or somebody else in that manner. So, but that's something we can definitely take a look at. I mean, it's not, because there might be some other issues, Commissioner Huey, that we might be able to add in as part of what you were talking about. So,
I think that's part of why there's the whole overconcentration metric in the first place, because
Yeah.
any one business, sure, maybe there's not that big an impact, but once you've got 5, 10, 20 businesses all selling the same thing in a given census tract, that's going to have potentially, I don't know the raw public health data, but potentially have sort of a cascading impact greater than any one single business would.
Yeah. I'm trying to find, apologize.
Thank you for that. Go over to Commissioner Bender.
I must say I have sympathy with what Commissioner Huey had mentioned. And also I did come across at one point, and I don't remember what city it was, but they established a threshold for determining in terms of the crime incidents in an area. And if you exceeded that amount, if you exceeded by 20%, that was a problem. So, but they actually put that in as their policy. That's what we don't have here. The only other thing is I'm going to remind my fellow commissioners that in roughly 2028, ABC is going to should be reevaluating the Type 20 licenses and they'll determine whether counties and cities and towns have are going to be under a moratorium. And I will point to Albany and Pleasant Hill actually are under a moratorium. It's only for the Type 20 licenses, which requires then if you want to open a business, you have to go get an existing license and purchase that. So that could be coming at some point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too, is when you, because even like, let's say, for example, that they can buy licenses. So depending on where those licenses are now being issued from or to, or who's buying what and how. I mean, that's why when we look at some, and I pulled up the actual alcohol sales section. Benefit. I'm looking at kind of the standard. I'm trying to find the. Well, it's just as part of as part of the public convenience necessity, which determines if there is an overconcentration of licenses, and the city council is the appropriate. Okay, that makes that. I'm trying to look for more of the environmental ones, and we see economic benefit, but I don't see anything regarding the applicant or the environmental issues.
Dave, if you don't mind me just adding.
Yeah, no, go.
Okay.
No, add in.
There are general findings for conditions of approval that I'm sure plan commissioners have seen a number of different times for various types of uses, whether it's like a commercial use or whatever new use comes in that needs a use permit. The alcohol sales, of course, need the conditional use permit and are also evaluated under these findings. So one of the findings is, of course, the consistency with the general plan, specific plan, and zoning code. And then another one that might, allude to the environmental issues is the establishment, maintenance, or operation of the use will not, under the circumstances of the particular case, including location, size, design, and operating characteristics, be detrimental to the health, safety, peace, morals, comfort, or general welfare of persons residing or working in the neighborhood of such use, or to the general welfare of the city.
Yes, that's the one I was looking for, but it was in the conditional use permit finding. So remember, there's two sets of findings. There's findings for the public convenience necessity, and there's also the findings for the conditional use permit. So they all have to be adhered to either by the city council or the planning commission, but they all have to be adhered to. So yeah, thanks, Justin. Great find on that.
Thanks for the clarification on that. Commissioner Utch.
No comments.
All right, any other closing comments? All right. Thank you so much, Commander, for being here with us tonight. We really appreciate all the insight and information that you were able to share with us. We don't have any particular action, just to accept the report. So with that, we will move on to our next item, the city planners report. Planning Manager Hannum, do you have anything to report for us?
I don't have a lot tonight. I just have the standard stuff in terms of the ad hoc committee finalized the last set of comments for the objective development design standards. So I'm making those changes and hopefully get that back. We get that back soon. I'm still waiting for the comments from the community development director and the city attorney. So once I have all those, then I'll put them all together, and then I'll start scheduling meetings for the planning commission and city council for those items. I will be also, the ad hoc committee doesn't know it yet, but I'll be bringing back the outdoor dining, their final comments, because we've included all those comments from the first round, and so we'll be including those and get that moving forward as well, and get that to the community development director and the city attorney. Other than that, I mean, the Kmart project, or I don't think they've got their demolition permit, but it's been applied for, and they're moving forward on that. We've been working with some potential developers on some sites at 890 San Pablo. Also looking at, we've had a lot of, or at least I've gotten a lot of comments regarding some of the church site on San Pablo. I think that's 720, is that 720 San Pablo or 6 something? But the church site, it's not the church site, it's the printing shop, the print shop over there. So there's been some inquiries about that property. So I don't know if it's for sale but we were getting a lot more inquiries on that. And then we're finally finalizing the lot line adjustment for the post office project, and finalizing the parcel map for the land donation that you guys approved a couple months ago. So we're following up on those items right now. And as the commission is aware, the council adopted the active transportation plan. So they did that at their last meeting, so that was a big lift. And then, so that's all I have, unless you have any questions on anything that I can answer.
Sounds good. Are there any questions? Yes, Commissioner Lamb-Julian.
So behind the Faria house, there is a partially paved path with lights. Is that city property?
Well, the Faria house is city property. Yeah, I think it's an easement. The city has an easement through there. I don't think we own the property on the trail sides. On the 2 trail sides, there's 2 sides of there. You can access Faria property from both sides. The 2 sides of the 3 houses, Buena Vista. But I think they're easements. I don't think we own the property, but I think we have easements.
Okay. So I was on a walkabout, and so the path, it had lights on it, and the lights were all broken out. Okay. And then there was ivy and blackberries, and people letting their dogs run around the property.
Okay. We'll talk to code enforcement about that and Public Works, since it's still our property and we still own the Faria property.
And I'm complete. Thank you.
Huh?
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions? Is there any public comment on the plant manager's report?
Yeah, DC hand raised online. Same color from the phone number ending in 5748. So when you are ready, please press *6 to unmute.
Please go ahead when you're ready. You will have 5 minutes.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I'll just wanted to follow up on a couple of things and something else, but has there been any action on the restaurant Dave's Hot Chicken with regard to their 6 or 7 extra outdoor dining tables that are obstructing the sidewalk pathway? And every other time I go by there, people sometimes are bumping into them, but with more traffic than not. And then I believe there's only one time when I saw 3 or 4 young gentlemen sitting at one table out there late at night, eating a snack and chewing the fat. But I don't think we need all that in that breezeway corridor opposite Pete's, and also right on that front sidewalk where people, it gets real busy there. And all that does is encourage all the other shop owners up and down that corridor to have a war with who's going to have more tables or more customer chairs and what have you on that sidewalk. So that whole area needs to be looked at and cleaned up. And then is there any word on what's happening with the Oza restaurant? Because I understand the city manager met, and I don't think he had anyone else, but there was talk he was supposed to meet with the city attorney and or the attorney from the owner-operator Dioza restaurant lady, because she wants to reclaim part of that farmer's market parking lot. So if that's the case, my suggestion would be maybe they can use the parking lot up at that Pinole church up there on Pinole Valley Road next to the library, if not the parking lot right across the street behind Kings Valley. That's a city public parking lot, because she's telling them she wants her 3 or 4 or 5 parking spaces back from the farmers market, and we can't afford to disrupt that business because that's a big draw down there on Saturdays. But I wonder if Mr. Hannum heard anything about that, or he could discuss it with the city manager to get an update, because that situation's kind of in flux still, I believe. And the library of Pinole got $4 million to improve the library renovation, and I think half of that was a grant. And I wonder how much the other half cost the city of Pinole, or that maybe came from the county with the payments we make of $250,000 every year. But why would the Pinole Library take second position to Kensington Library? Because they seem they got more with less, or more with the same money, and it's taken them less than 10 months to do their work there, and they're getting a full renovation both inside and out, whereas the Pinole Library, we're not getting any inside renovation. And isn't our library as old as the Kensington Library? And I just wonder how that deal went down there, and not to mention they still don't have a signage out there to say, you know, your tax dollars at work. We got the grant money from the state or the feds to help pay for this big renovation project that's starting in March and it's not going to be completed till sometime in January, to let the public know what's going on there. There's just construction signs on the fencing, and there's a tiny little 1-by sign thing with an arrow says tennis access, but it doesn't say alternative parking on the side streets, or maybe on a Saturday or during the week. Maybe they can use the church parking lot, as well as let people know what's going on with that project, like the Walnut Creek does with the Heather Farms build out. They got a big nice sign there saying, this is your tax dollar and grant funding money at work, and this is what we're going to do at Heather Farms, but not the city of Pinole or the county library. You think they could get together and spend some money, a few $100s on a nice sign, if not a sawhorse sign, out there in the driveway, because it's causing the community a lot of confusion and anxiety, not to mention they can't open the bathrooms there, and they can't even fix the water fountain out there next to the tennis court. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any other public comment?
There are no other comments right now.
Thank you. And Plan Manager Hannum, is there anything you would like to respond from the comment?
Yeah, in terms of the tables and chairs, code enforcement and I are working on that project and working on that right now to get them to move the tables and chairs, or they've got to go through the administrative use permit process for outdoor dining. So we're working on that. In terms of the farmers market and the Diosa, I mean, that's an issue that's Yeah, it came up, and it's being worked out through the administration and working between DEOSA and the farmers market, and we're kind of acting as as kind of like a go-between. We're like the go-between in that. Yeah, so they're working on that issue. In regards to the library, right now that's a county project. That's not a city project. I know we're going to inherit the library here shortly in a few short years, but right now all of that funding is from the county. I don't know if the city's put in any money besides its yearly cost to the library. So that's all I know about that. So whether the county puts a big sign out there regarding where they got their money from, that's going to be up to the county. They need to talk to the county on that. Losing my voice. Other than that, I think that answered all the questions.
Yeah, thank you for your insight on that.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments on the plan report? All right, and then we will go to the commissioners' report. Any commissioners would like to report on anything? I do have an item to report, actually. Last week, I was able to present the AP and 80 resolution to the City Council and fielded their questions. I think it went pretty well. There were some good amount of questions, some trickier questions from some of the council members. But I think most of their questions were addressed as best as we could have. And I actually did end up getting some feedback saying that it was a good presentation. So I'm happy to report on that. Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
Yeah, I was in the audience for that presentation. I think you did a good job making the presentation, so thank you for doing that. And I had a question. Were you able to get the contact information for the property owner? Because I know that Councilmember Martinez-Rubin said that she'd heard directly from the property owner asking, why she didn't have an opportunity to give more input and so on. And it would be good to, have that sort of input during this whole process, right?
No, I did not get any contact information from Councilmember Martinez-Rubin. She did say that she was in direct communication with the developer and the owner. She did say that they said that they have something planned at some point, but did not share any further details. Any other questions? Any public comment? Okay. Any communications? Yes, Vice Chair Menace.
Yes, so as usual, I'm going to repeat out my communications that I made as part of my weekly email just to inform the public of, what I said to a subset of the public. So first, tonight's Planning Commission meeting. Second, senior food distribution program tomorrow, 10 to 11 at the senior center. You need to be a resident of Pinole, over 55, fill out the application. Third, there's going to be a finance subcommittee meeting, hopefully, on Wednesday at 5, hybrid City Hall. Going to be going over the budget and long-term projections and the capital improvement plan. There's been some changes since the last projection. And finally, there's going to be a general strike on Friday, May 1st. And if you're interested in more information about that, you can find that out at maydaystrong.org. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other communications? Nope. And with that, our next meeting will be the next Planning Commission regularly scheduled meeting is on May 11th at 7 p.m. And with that, we will be adjourned. Thank you.